My grandmother removed me from her will because I sided with my mother when my father cheated on her, giving my share to my brother. But as far as I'm concerned, she can die alone now. Here's the situation. My grandmother, whom I call Nana, decided to exclude me from her will because I supported my mother and moved in with her after my parents decided to get a divorce. All of this has happened within a matter of weeks, and it was already hard enough that my parents separated since they had been together for many years. They had been married for a very long time, and I never thought something like this would happen, but I guess it was bound to happen at some point. Because it turns out, my father had been cheating on my mother. He was involved with a former college girlfriend, and it was discovered a couple of weeks ago because my mother already had her suspicions. One day, she decided to follow him, and that's how she confirmed everything. Of course, my father tried to justify himself, but in the end, it all came down to the same thing. He was bored. And apparently, this wasn't even the first time. He admitted that in the past, he had used dating apps, although he had managed not to get caught. He said that before it had all been superficial and purely physical. But this time he became emotionally involved because it was someone he knew well and had a connection with, not just casual encounters. When my mother confronted him, he ended up confessing everything, unable to keep hiding it, revealing each of the times he had been unfaithful over the years. Even if my mother had considered giving the marriage another chance after finding out everything, it was no longer possible. The fact that all of this happened simply because he felt bored was something she couldn't tolerate. I know my mother well. She has always been a devoted wife and mother. No one is perfect, but she always gave her best for the family without betraying anyone. She did everything she could to support my father every step of the way. To be cast aside just because he was bored, to me, that's reason enough to leave, and that's exactly what she did. Honestly, I'm surprised that my brother chose to side with my father when my mother left the house. I, on the other hand, chose to go with her. My father has tried to contact me many times, but I've been avoiding him because I don't want to talk to him right now. As expected, that has caused some conflict with my Nana. At this point, she is considering removing me from her will and leaving everything to my father and my brother just because I chose to support my mother in this situation. She seems to think it's some kind of punishment for me or something like that. I can't understand what she was thinking. It feels unfair, especially because I was the one who stayed with her and took care of her 2 years ago when she was on the verge of dying. She fell down the stairs, broke her hip, and then developed sepsis. She remained bedridden for several months. At that time, I was on a gap year before starting university. I could have done anything with my time, but I chose to stay with her. My father worked too much and could only visit her a few days a week. My mother and my brother could only come on weekends because they had classes. That meant I was there most of the time. I read to her, talked with her, kept her company, and tried to prevent her from falling into depression. Something she had already struggled with before, especially after my grandfather passed away. She had a nurse, but I also helped whenever it was needed. I feel like there should be some recognition for that. I never asked for it. I don't think she has to constantly thank me, but it hurts that it was so easy for her to remove me from her will. And on top of that, I found out through someone else she didn't even tell me directly. Someone handed me a handwritten letter. In it, she said she was very disappointed in my attitude and that she never would have thought I would abandon my father in that way. She wrote that it would be better for my brother to receive what she had reserved for me, since I don't deserve anything for not being loyal to my family. I suppose she means being loyal to that side of the family, and but I'm also loyal to my mother, who was cheated on. I shouldn't have to choose, when the only person who did wrong here was my father. But my grandmother doesn't care. It's also ironic that she talks about loyalty when her own son couldn't be faithful to his family. I didn't want my mother to face all of this alone. Even though she is strong and independent, I didn't want her to go through it without support. That's why I decided to move in with her. If anything, this shows how loyal I am to my family. I gave up my room and the comfort of living with my father and chose to go with my mother so she wouldn't be alone. Meanwhile, my brother, as cowardly as ever, chose to stay with my father. Now, they act like they're inseparable, basically, because he depends too much on my dad. Financially, he's willing to set aside anything, values, principles, whatever, for money. And I know for a fact that my brother doesn't have a real moral code or principles, because he is a thief. Over the past few years, he has stolen many things from our own house, from our grandmother's house, and who knows how many other people only to sell them on eBay. He has a serious gambling problem. It all started when he was 18, and he still tells everyone he's going to quit, but so far he hasn't. My father made it very clear from the beginning, the first time he had problems, that he was not going to help him pay off his gambling debts. So he could forget about that if he ever thought he could rely on him. The first time, my mom and I were the ones who helped him because my father had made it very clear that he was not going to get involved, that it was his mistake and he had to deal with it on his own. On a couple more occasions, my brother came to me, or my mother again, until we also decided to set a boundary. So imagine that after all of that, he still chose to side with my father instead of my mother. Anyway, over the past few years, he has gotten into a lot of trouble because he developed the habit of stealing anything valuable he could find in the house and then selling it to cover his debts. My father even threatened several times to call the police. He also told him he would kick him out of the house, and my brother would beg for forgiveness, but over time, he would go back to doing the same thing. Both of them knew they were too afraid of damaging their reputation to actually take real action against him. He even stole from my grandmother's house, taking whatever he considered valuable, including some paintings, jewelry, and quite expensive decorative items. My grandmother would notice things were missing, but my father, being her son, wanted to avoid stressing her out any further after everything she had already been through with her health. That's why we didn't tell her the truth, because it would have broken her heart, and she was already too fragile to find out that her own grandson was stealing from her. Over time, she would forget, so we would tell her the items were stored in the attic, and she almost always accepted that explanation. But the reality is that all those objects had been stolen and sold on eBay. My brother kept all the money. It's not that we didn't try to stop him, because we did. We even told him we would report him to the police, although my father didn't want to and always believed that sooner or later he would change. Because of that, he kept doing whatever he wanted without facing almost any consequences. Well, I thought it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. So after my grandmother sent me that email, I decided it was time to tell her the truth. I had many old photos and several screenshots of conversations with my brother about everything I mentioned before. I told her that her favorite grandson had been stealing from her all this time, that all those items she thought she had lost were never actually in the attic. That was just a lie my father made up to cover for my brother. And we had to go along with it because we didn't want to break her heart. But now, since she made it very clear that I didn't matter to her at all, I thought at least I should be honest with her one last time. Because apparently family loyalty is everything, and I wanted to show her loyalty by telling her the truth. And that was it. After I sent her that message, my father and my brother started attacking me because apparently my grandmother didn't like my father's lie. According to them, I'm the most selfish person in the world and don't even deserve to be part of the family. My grandmother is clearly very angry. Nana has decided that she might remove everyone from the will and donate everything to charity. She is threatening to do it, although she still hasn't actually done it. Honestly, I doubt she will, but they are still blaming me for the situation. So I guess she checked the attic, realized I was telling the truth, and saw that she had been lied to. This is a big problem because the inheritance is very valuable, and obviously my father and brother do not want to lose it. Also, she is considering selling her share of the family company, so they would also lose income from that side. Basically, none of this is going well for them. They've told me I need to do something to fix it, because according to them, it was a selfish act on my part. But the truth is, I have no intention of doing anything. I feel like they deserve everything that is happening. They are greedy and unpleasant, and I think I did the right thing. My grandmother was hurt. That is true, but it's not like she hasn't also treated me badly. Just because he is her son doesn't mean she should excuse infidelity. I'm not saying she had to do something extreme like remove her son from the will. She could have stayed neutral, but defending him and attacking me for doing the right thing is absurd. Edit. Okay, there has been some confusion about a few points in my post, so don't worry, I'm going to clarify everything. I am currently 26 years old and my brother is 24. And yes, I know we probably should already be living separately, but we have been living with our parents for the past few years. We have a fairly large house, so we didn't see the need to move out, pay rent, and live separately. Privacy was never an issue for us. My brother and I had separate areas within the house, and we were comfortable with that arrangement. However, right now, I'm living separately with my mother in a rented apartment, although she plans to fight for the house during the divorce. My father took over control of my grandfather's company a few years before my brother was born, and it is a fairly large business in the city. That's how we have been able to afford this lifestyle. I expected to inherit the company one day, but at this point, I think I can assume that won't happen anymore. That's why I decided to study business administration. Since then, I have continued working with my father, although right now I'm kind of on a break. I know it's not ideal to mix personal and professional matters, but in this situation, it feels impossible to separate them. As for my brother, he does absolutely nothing, and I mean that completely seriously. He does absolutely nothing at all. He stays at home all day. gambles online, pretends he's just playing video games, argues with the whole family, and then ends up reconciling because he knows he has nowhere else to go. My parents would have stepped in earlier, but they are too focused on their divorce process. And that's how everything reached this point. I'm not saying my mother doesn't feel pain over what's happening with her son, but right now she has much bigger problems to deal with, so she simply avoids the topic. As for my father, he used to be the one having the strongest confrontations with my brother. But now, just because my mother and I are on the same side, they've decided to form their own team and make it work. It's a pretty strange combination for sure, because both of them are selfish and cowardly. So as long as it benefits them, they will stay together without hesitation, because for them, nothing matters more than their own benefit, even if it means others end up getting hurt. Update 1. It has been about a week and a half since my last update, and I've been quite busy, honestly, because I went back to work. I know it's not the best environment to be in, but as long as I don't get fired, I have responsibilities to fulfill. If that happens, I'll have to look for another job. I have been working with my father since I finished my studies, and I would like to think that this company would one day be mine. But with everything that is happening, I already understand that it probably won't be. So now I just see it as any other job, from which, if I get fired, at least I will receive compensation. So, no, I'm not going to quit without a reason. I know my father won't want to bring in someone external, so the only person who could continue the family business would be my brother. And that would basically mean handing the company over to a thief, because he wouldn't do things properly. He would probably ruin it, but by then I guess I will already be far away. Anyway, I went back to work. And despite our personal issues, he has been professional. At least he knows how to keep things separate. We even talked about it. He told me that no matter what happens at home, we cannot bring those conflicts into work, which I found strange, but at least I appreciate that it is not another source of tension. It's confusing, I won't deny it. Sometimes I think about it, he's my father, a man I've known my whole life and always loved and respected. How could he have caused us so much pain? And sometimes I feel like I don't know him at all. It's a complicated situation, but I'm learning to handle it as best as I can. Still, I continue to believe that the company will not end up in my hands. That's why I'm actively looking for another job or waiting to be fired, whichever comes first. I can't be so naive as to think my father will consider me when dividing what he has. He is simply acting as if nothing is happening. As for my mother, she is currently attending mediation sessions with a lawyer, my father and his lawyer. The positive thing is that although she had the option of staying at home without worries, she chose to work because she wanted to have her own income. That is now proving very useful for her. I don't know exactly how things are progressing. Some days she seems fine, and other days she shuts herself away and spends hours in bed. I try to talk to her, I try to cheer her up, but I also know that sometimes I need to stop and give her space. So far, she has avoided talking about the divorce. Although occasionally I manage to get her to share small details. Most of the time she just feels sad. I'm trying to convince her to seek professional help or something similar, because honestly, I don't want to see her like this. It hurts me deeply just imagining everything she is going through. As for my grandmother, Nana still isn't speaking to anyone in the family. I know this because the same person who gave me the letter is the one who has information about her. Apparently, they tried to visit her in person to fix the situation, but she refused to even open the door. She has a housekeeper, and she made it very clear that Nana had given strict instructions if she let any family member in, she would lose her job, and she was not willing to risk that over this. That's something different, because before, even if any of us had conflicts with Nana or wanted to resolve something, she would always receive us. But this time, I guess she is really very angry. Of course, my brother is dealing with everything by gambling, which is why he is accumulating even more debt. In the past, I tried to help him, but you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. It's somewhat similar to my mother's situation since she also doesn't want to receive help. But unlike my brother, I think she is trying to process everything and will eventually open up, and I will be there to support her. On the other hand, my brother, I don't think he will ever change. Too much time has passed, and he simply likes gambling too much to give it up. Update 2. It has already been a month since my previous update, and today my brother decided to come visit my mother and me. It was a complete surprise because we didn't even know he could find out where we were living. But he said he spoke with our maternal grandparents, my mother's parents, and after a lot of insisting, they finally told him where we were. When he arrived, at first I was very hesitant to let him in, but he started crying. So I had to let him in before any neighbors started thinking badly of the situation. Even once inside, he kept crying. He just kept crying and apologizing over and over again. When he finally managed to calm down a bit, my mother and I asked him what was actually going on. It was completely unusual for him. He is not someone who usually cries. In fact, even in his worst moments, He would beg, argue, or try to negotiate with us, but he never cried. To be honest, I didn't even think he was capable of it. But clearly, this is a time full of family revelations. Anyway, once he calmed down enough to speak clearly, he told us that my father had kicked him out of the house. Apparently, he was completely in debt, and with no one else to turn to, he decided to ask our father for help. As always, my dad refused, making it very clear that he would stick to what he had said from the beginning, that the fact my brother chose to stay with him during the divorce changed nothing. He knew perfectly well that my brother only stayed because he had nowhere else to go. In reality, it was more out of convenience than anything else. My father was not going to thank him for that or get him out of trouble because he had already made it clear from the start if he got into gambling trouble again. He would have to deal with it on his own. He was not willing to spend the money he worked so hard for on someone determined to ruin his own life. They argued a bit. And eventually, my father decided to kick him out, telling him he was done, that he could no longer live in the house like a parasite, and still have the nerve to confront his own father, who had been supporting him all this time. While he was explaining all of this, I couldn't hold back my anger. I told him that, for once, I completely agreed with my father. That shocked him quite a bit. I'm not sure why, because he should have known there was a lot of truth in what my father said. Still, I explained in detail why I thought my father was right. I told him that even at his age, he hadn't bothered to get a university degree, let alone find a job. He had no clear idea what he was doing with his life. He spent all the money he received from our father on gambling instead of doing anything useful with it. Additionally, he was living in deplorable conditions. Even though we had domestic help, which is a privilege, his room looked like it had just gone through a war. It was always a complete mess. He was the laziest person I had ever seen in my entire life. It was as if he had no ambition or goals and was determined to turn everything into a problem for everyone else. I told him he couldn't expect all of us to keep fixing his problems while he refused to change his attitude or accept that he himself is the problem. He is not a victim of anything. Then he started crying again, saying it was absurd that he had come looking for emotional support and maybe some help, and instead I was criticizing him and making him feel worse. He kept looking at my mother, hoping she would intervene, maybe even invite him to stay, but she said nothing. She just sat there in silence. I suppose the fact that he chose our father during the divorce and stayed with him instead of supporting her is something she won't forget easily. And yes, at the end of the day, he is still my brother and her son. We love him in our own way. But loving someone doesn't mean tolerating everything they do, letting them do whatever they want, and pretending we are okay with it, because we are not. So I told him that if he had come looking for help, he wouldn't find it here. It was over. We were not going to keep helping him. If he wanted guidance to fix his life and become a better person, then maybe we could talk. But if what he wanted was money to pay off his debts, he would have to go somewhere else, because he wouldn't get anything here. Then he got angry, insulted me, said all kinds of things, and left. All our attempts to avoid the neighbors thinking badly of the situation fell apart, and as much as I wanted to go after him and say a few more things, nothing nice, of course I didn't, because it wasn't worth it. Trying to be right with someone who isn't in their right mind doesn't make you wiser, it just puts you on their level. Update 3. Hello everyone, it has been a year and a half since my last update, and a couple of weeks ago, my mother's divorce was finally settled. It was a very long process because the case ended up in court. It was difficult for the whole family, and I'm very glad that it is finally over. In the end, she obtained exactly what she had requested in her claim. It was not an ideal resolution, but my father decided to give up and reach a settlement outside of court because everything was dragging on too long and he could no longer continue with it. As for my brother, after my father kicked him out, he stayed with some friends for a couple of weeks while bothering any relative he could to lend him money. I think after that, he went back to living with our father and is probably receiving some kind of support. I don't know for sure. I haven't even bothered to ask. I could check with my dad and find out. But honestly, I feel like I just don't care anymore. I haven't had any contact with my father either since I finally got another job and left the family company, so to speak. In the end, I chose to resign and look for another opportunity because I knew that company would never be mine. And it turned out to be a very good decision. My grandmother sold her stake in the company the majority share, and now my father still works there, but in a lower position and is no longer the owner, so to speak. My grandmother decided that the company and the family no longer mattered to her, and she now lives off the money she got from her share. Good for her, because she is going to need that money to continue paying for her care. At least I won't be the one rushing to help her if she becomes seriously ill again. She is already ill, but not as badly as when I had to take care of her. I've been told I should forgive her anyway, that it's not her fault she didn't know what was going on with my brother, but that's not the point. What happened with my brother only shows what she truly cares about. When my father did something truly serious, I didn't even expect her to punish him, just not take his side would have been enough. That there is infidelity on her side of the family doesn't seem to matter. But if someone steals, that is unacceptable. That is the message she made clear. Although, to be fair, my brother hasn't been unfaithful, but not by choice, just because he has no one to cheat on. My mother finally got the house, but since it was too big for her, she decided to sell it and keep the money. She also agreed to receive help, and I think that has been very good for her. She is not the same mother she was before the divorce, but she is also not the same as during the worst period when she would spend hours in bed. In the end, everyone showed who they really were and faced the consequences. I'm not saying I'm happy that my grandmother will end up alone or that my father has lost a large part of the company and taken a significant pay cut, but it's not like they didn't bring it on themselves. Edit. No, my brother was not living with my father after all. Thankfully, I didn't contact him to find out because it turns out he doesn't really know where he is either. My brother is living several cities away in a trailer park. From what I know, he has sought some help and is working at a small factory to support himself. That makes me happy, not because he is struggling, but because there's a chance that in a few years I can say he has recovered. There's still a long way to go before that can be said, but at least it's a start.